She could still taste the metallic tang of blood on her lips as she fled. Her bridal veil gone, torn away by the gusts, and the ivory gown, the one that once symbolized eternity, was now just tattered cloth clinging to her battered skin. Each gasp seared like embers in her lungs. Her bare feet pounded against the cracked earth path, leaving faint smears of blood in her wake. His voice still echoed through the darkness, clawing at her. Victor Kane, the man she'd been coerced into marrying. The man who grinned for the preacher at dawn and struck her before dusk. He claimed she was his. He said no one would trust her word. And when she fought back, his ring sliced her cheek. His hands, they left dark bruises across her sides. She'd hidden the blade beneath her wedding dress, waiting for the moment he turned away after hitting her for resisting his grasp. She recalled his whisper, icy, vicious. "You'll never escape me again." But she had. Somehow she broke free. Her brother's face flickered in her mind. Elliot, trapped in Victor's barn. His life, the cost of her compliance. And now, under the scorching summer sun of the eastern plains, she ran, until her lungs begged for mercy. Her name was Clara Hensley, and every step she took was a plea that someone, somewhere, would find her before he did. By the time she stumbled upon the weathered homestead, the sky had turned amber and crimson. The air shimmered with heat, the land cloaked in stillness. She staggered against a wooden fence, gripping its rough surface to stay upright. Her body shook, her vision wavered. When she looked up, she saw him, a tall figure with grey flecks in his dark hair, dressed in a worn jacket and a faded blue scarf. He stood beside a mare, the kind of man who'd witnessed too much and stopped expecting mercy from the world. His name was Amos Carver, 58, once a sheriff, now a shadow among the living. He froze when he saw her, leaning against the shed, her torn blouse barely covering her shoulders, her face streaked with dust and tears, and those bruises, so many bruises. For a moment neither spoke. Only the wind stirred, rustling the parched grass between them. Then Clara's legs gave out. Amos caught her before she collapsed, his hands steady, yet hesitant. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, hazel and clouded with pain. "Please," she rasped, her voice raw. "Don't. Let him find me." He could have walked away. He could have left her there, like a spectre from another man's torment. But something in her voice pierced the years of solitude that had kept him isolated. Something fragile, desperate, human. He lifted her gently and carried her toward the glow spilling from his cabin. Inside, shadows lingered, and so did the truth. As the door shut behind them, one question hung heavy. Had she fled one monster only to stumble into another kind of peril? When Clara woke, the first thing she saw was the soft flicker of a small fire. The second was him. Amos Carver sat by the window, hands wrapped around a steaming mug, eyes fixed on her, like he feared she'd vanish if he blinked. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. Her body ached everywhere. Every motion sent a sharp sting across her skin. He noticed. "Easy now," he said softly. "You're safe here." Safe? The word struck her harder than any blow ever had. She hadn't felt safe in months, maybe years. The cabin smelled of coffee, smoke, and aged timber. It was small, but warm, filled with the kind of quiet only solitary men gather over time.
Amos kept his distance like a man wary of startling a wounded animal. He offered her a mug of warm water, and when their fingers brushed, she flinched. She studied his face, searching for the deceit she'd come to expect from men, but found only the weight of his own burdens in his eyes. He didn't take it personally. He'd seen that look before, too many times, back when he wore a badge and locked men like Victor behind bars. Now he just mended fences and tried to forget. Later, as he tended to the bruises on her arms, she winced. He slowed, moving as gently as his calloused hands could manage. Her voice broke the silence, soft but firm. "Dab it lightly," she said, guiding him without meeting his gaze. It wasn't an order, more like a memory slipping free. And for some reason, those 3 words hit Amos like a shot to the chest. He worked quietly after that, each touch cautious, measured, as if he feared she'd vanish if he pressed too hard. When he finished, he sat back, studying her face in the fire's flickering light. She looked different now, not just wounded, but alive again. In that quiet space between them, something began to shift.
When he asked her name, she told him. Then came the truth he wasn't prepared for. Her hands trembled as she spoke, words spilling out like they'd been caged too long. "My husband did this," she said softly. "He said if I ran, he'd find me and end it." Amos stared into the fire, jaw clenched. He'd known men like that, men who thought wealth bought power, men who treated women like possessions. He used to lock them up. Now he just fixed fences and tried not to dwell on the past, but something about this woman made forgetting impossible. Outside, the wind wailed across the plains. The mare shifted uneasily in the dark, and somewhere far off, thunder rumbled. Amos stood, eyes narrowing toward the horizon, because deep down he knew that sound wasn't just thunder. It was trouble, coming for her. Amos didn't sleep that night. He sat by the window, rifle propped against the wall, watching rain streak the glass. Every lightning flash made him half expect to see riders crossing the fields. Clara slept on the cot, blanket pulled to her chin, her face calm, for the first time in who knows how long. But Amos couldn't shake the sense that peace was a fleeting lie out here. When the knock came, it wasn't Victor. It was a younger man, drenched, anxious, a deputy from town. "Evening, Mr. Carver," he said, twisting his hat in his hands. "Name's Caleb Holt." Amos grunted, gesturing him inside. The deputy's eyes fell on Clara before he spoke. He said, "I think I know who she's running from," he said quietly. "My cousin worked for him a year ago. Never came back after he hired her for his tavern. I've been watching him since." Amos waited, silent. The young man sighed. He said, "Victor Kane owns half the valley, maybe more. Got the sheriff in his pocket. I heard what happened at the chapel. Folks say she fled mid-vows. He's had men hunting her ever since. The sheriff looks the other way for a share of Kane's profits, but the marshal's been tracking him for months." Amos's stomach twisted. He'd seen Victor Kane's kind before, men who smiled for sermons and killed for pleasure. He thought he'd left that world behind when he surrendered his badge, but the past doesn't always stay buried. Caleb pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Marshal Thompson's coming from Reading, been building a case against Kane for months, smuggling, bribes, worse. But we need her testimony to make it hold." Clara looked up, eyes wide with fear. "If I speak, he'll kill my brother. He swore he would." Amos saw the pain behind her words. This wasn't just fear, it was guilt. She was running for someone she loved,
not just herself. Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of hooves, growing louder. Not from the storm this time, real hooves. Amos moved to the window. A lantern swayed in the dark, then another, then 5 more. His jaw tightened. "They've found her," he said. Caleb swallowed hard. "You sure you want to protect her, Mr. Carver? Victor Kane doesn't forgive." Amos glanced at Clara, trembling, clutching the blanket like it could shield her. Then he turned to the door. "I don't care what Victor Kane forgives. He just crossed the wrong man."
The wind howled again, carrying the sound of hooves and thunder across the plains. It was the kind of sound that meant everything was about to change. Now, take a moment, catch your breath, maybe grab a glass of water and settle in. Tell me where you're reading this from and what time it is where you are. And if you're hooked, let me know you're out there so I can keep sharing stories like this. The hoofbeats came slow this time, deliberate, unhurried. Amos Carver stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, the rain cooling the air around him. The old boards creaked under his boots, heavy with mud and water. The sandal by the door still dripped from the storm, its leather groaning, like it remembered long trails and longer nights. Caleb stood near the doorway, tense but ready. Inside, Clara gripped the blanket, her heart pounding so loud it echoed in her ears. Through the misty haze, 5 riders emerged, no more, no less. Victor Kane rode at the front. Tall, angular, too polished for a man who thrived on cruelty. He smirked when he saw Amos. "Well," Victor called out, "seems you chose the wrong woman to shelter." Amos didn't reply. He stepped off the porch, boots sinking into the damped soil. "Turn around, Kane," he said, voice steady but firm. "She's under my roof now. That means she's safe." Victor's laugh was low, venomous. "Safe? You think your rundown homestead can stop me? I own this valley, Carver. Hell, I own half the men in it." Amos lifted his gaze slowly. "Not this man." For a moment, no one moved. Only the rain spoke, pattering softly. Then Victor's smirk faded. "Boys," he said softly, "show him what happens when people forget their place." 2 of his men dismounted, rifles drawn, fanning out to use the shed for cover. Their shots splintered the porch where Caleb crouched. Caleb shouted a warning, and the world erupted into noise. Gunfire tore through the quiet, shattering wood, lighting up the night. Amos fired back, quick, precise, like a man who'd lived this moment before. Lightning flashed, glinting off his rifle barrel, turning the rain to silver. A bullet grazed his arm, blood soaking his sleeve, but he held his aim steady, years of instinct taking over. 1 rider fell, another staggered back, cursing. Victor drew his pistol, aiming at the porch, but Caleb fired first. The shot rang across the plains, sending Victor's hat tumbling into the mud. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Then Victor wheeled his horse, barking at his men, "Not worth dying for tonight. Pull back." And just like that, they vanished into the fog, leaving only silence and the scent of gunpowder. The air was thick with the smell of wet leather and spent shells clinging to the night.
Amos lowered his rifle, chest heaving, knowing this was only the start. He glanced at Caleb, then at the cabin door. Inside, Clara stood trembling, tears mingling with rain on her cheeks. "It's over," Caleb said softly. Amos shook his head. "No, son, it's just beginning." Thunder rumbled in the distance, fading into the hills. But then came another sound, a single horse, a rider returning. And this time, it wasn't Victor.
By morning, the storm had passed. The sky over the valley turned soft gold, the air carrying the fresh scent of rain-soaked grass and cedar. The kind of smell that makes you miss open country. Amos stood by the fence, rifle loose at his side, watching the sun rise over the hills for the first time in years, feeling something he hadn't in too long: peace. Behind him, the cabin door creaked. Clara stepped out, wrapped in one of his old shirts, her hair messy, but her eyes clear. She looked at him like a man who'd given her more than refuge. He'd given her hope. Caleb had ridden to town hours earlier to meet Marshal Thompson and finish what they'd started. Word was Victor Kane had been caught trying to cross the county line. No amount of money could save him now. Elliot Hensley was found alive in Victor's barn that morning, weak but breathing, when the deputy has cut his ropes. His first word was his sister's name. Amos turned as Clara stepped beside him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she said quietly, "You didn't have to do this for me." He smiled, eyes still on the sunrise. "Stay as long as you need," he said, voice low. "This place could use a little light again. Sometimes a man's got to stop running from what's right." She nodded, tears tracing her cheeks, but not from fear this time, from relief, from something like hope. The land was quiet, the kind of quiet that follows a storm, when you finally remember how to breathe. Amos looked at her and said softly, "You ever think how life keeps handing us new beginnings, even when we think we've run out?" She smiled faintly. "I didn't think I'd live to see one." He reached for her hand, rough fingers brushing her skin. She didn't pull away. She hesitated, then let her fingers rest in his, a small step toward trust. Sometimes that's all healing is, choosing to stay when every instinct screams to run. They walked toward the shed together, the morning light wrapping them like a promise. Behind them, the scars of the night began to fade under the sun. A story that started in pain was ending in peace. The wind carried the scent of cedar and new beginnings. Somewhere out there the plains stretched on, quiet, patient, waiting for the next soul brave enough to start again. Now, think about this. If someone showed up at your door, broken, scared, needing help, would you open it? Would you take that risk, even if it cost you your comfort, maybe your peace? Because sometimes the person you save ends up saving you right back. If this story stirred something in you, let me know you're out there. Tell me where you're reading from and what time it is. Because somewhere, under a sky like this, someone's waiting for their second chance.